You may have seen this World According to Briggs video, 10 Reasons Nobody's Moving to Atlanta, Georgia. Well, let me tell you what he gets wrong and what he gets right, and why, contrary to his thesis, everybody wants to move to Atlanta right now. Hey, this is Parker Smith. I'm a native Georgian. Been in Atlanta almost 35 years now, so I know what I'm talking about. Let's check it out.
Atlanta, Georgia has been one of the more popular places for relocation since about 1991, when its population growth hit 5%, after hovering around 2.8% for over 2 decades. Things were happening in Atlanta. The music scene was booming. The Atlanta area had a growing tech and film industry.
Had a growing tech and film industry? He starts off with these blah blah stats about how no one is moving to Atlanta and about how Atlanta had a growing tech and film industry. Past tense. Well, the tech and film industry has never been bigger or stronger than it is right now. And as far as people moving to Atlanta, in 2019, the population of Metro Atlanta was about 5.7 million people. Today, in 2023, 6.1 million. Lots of people are moving to Atlanta. So he gets a lot wrong right out of the gate. Let's check out his top 10 list, see if things get any better. Number 10.
Number 10, it's too far from the ocean.
Well, he's right on this one. I've got a lot of clients who've moved here from California. I've polled them myself, comparing Georgia and California for a couple of other videos we've done. And they've said, we really miss being close to the ocean. In Atlanta, your closest ocean is going to be Tybee Island, Georgia, just outside of Savannah, which is 4.5 hours away. A better, more upscale and more enjoyable experience is going to be found in Hilton Head Island, South Carolina, which is going to take you 5 hours. Number 9.
Number 9, the heat and humidity. Yeah, that's
Well, it is hot and humid here during July and August. There's a reason they call it a hot Atlanta. But I promise you, it's not Dallas hot, it's not Phoenix hot, it's not even Florida hot. It's totally manageable, and it's not going to kill you.
Atlanta only has 2 seasons, summer and Christmas. The hottest month...
That's not true. Atlanta has 4 distinct seasons. We have a very mild, relatively mild winter, especially if you're coming from Chicago. We have a very long spring. It just seems to last forever. Spring actually often seems to last until the middle or the end of June. July and August are going to be your hot and humid, muggy months. And then really fall starts in September and seems to last forever. One thing people don't know about Atlanta is that oftentimes we're raking leaves right up until Christmas. That's how long fall lasts. So basically the beginning of September all the way through until Christmas. I have several in-depth videos on Atlanta weather and climate, and you can find those in the description box below.
The hottest month of the year in Atlanta is going to be July, where the average temperature is around 90 degrees. And it stays there. That's not like what it gets to a couple days in a row. It's normally going to stay like that all of July. The rest of the summer, it's going to be around 81 degrees is their average. Again, during the summer in Atlanta, it can get up to 102 easily.
No, it almost never gets up to 102. In fact, I looked up to see the last time Atlanta was actually above 100, and it was all the way back in 2012.
Heat and humidity and that muggy feeling it's going to kill your allergies. If you have allergies and you move to Atlanta, be prepared. It's rough.
The heat and humidity doesn't have anything to do with the allergies. The pollen season starts really at the beginning of March, kind of continues through until May. The heat and the humidity, as I said before, really doesn't start until end of June. One final thought on summertime in Atlanta is we have so many trees that in the evenings the heat just dissipates. We don't have a lot of concrete that holds on to the heat and radiates it out. The heat just goes away in the evening. So it's a very rare summer night when I'm not sitting out on the patio reading a book or listening to some music.
Number 8, the bugs. This is a really weird one. Recently, I've been seeing that people will bring up bugs a lot more in different...
The South has bugs, yes. Your most common problem here is going to be mosquitoes or cockroaches. On mosquitoes, with the amount of rain we get, you'd think we'd have actually a lot more mosquitoes than we do. They really don't bother me all that much. The strange thing is, it's when it stops raining, that's when you get a lot of mosquitoes. The mosquitoes breed in the stagnant water, but when it's continuously raining, all of that's getting washed away pretty regularly, so you don't have a lot of mosquito larvae. Now, as far as cockroaches go, they're really not much of a problem. You buy these bug bombs from Home Depot. I put one in my basement, one in my attic. I do that 2 or 3 times, between spring and fall, and we rarely see any cockroaches.
Number 7, they don't have the best public transportation. This was a big one for a lot.
Well, this is true. MARTA is our public transportation system in Atlanta, and it isn't very good. Actually, it sucks. MARTA pretty much doesn't go anywhere you need to go except the airport, and with Uber and Lyft ride sharing, there's really no reason to take MARTA to the airport anymore. Atlanta is not like New York City or Chicago, where it's built on a grid, which makes it easily accessible through a light rail system. Atlanta is a big, sprawling metro area, and you need a car to get around. The number of my real estate clients who've expressed an interest in using public transportation when they move here is 0. It's just not a factor when people are deciding to move to Atlanta.
Number 6, bad traffic. It is said that the average driver in Atlanta loses about...
This is true. Atlanta has some of the worst traffic in the country, and oddly, the Georgia DOT has been working on the roads seemingly forever. And oddly enough, one of the best things that's ever happened to Atlanta traffic was COVID. It got people in the habit of working from home, and it just has taken a lot of the traffic off the road. One thing people don't understand about Atlanta traffic is that if you live inside the perimeter, traffic is generally not that bad. You can take the surface streets where you want to go, and you avoid the highway traffic. Some of the worst traffic in Atlanta is actually out in the suburbs, Cobb County, Roswell Road, and Sandy Springs. We drive all over Atlanta for our tennis league, and I tell you, even on Saturdays, the suburbs, the traffic can be absolutely horrible. My number 1 rule for moving to Atlanta is to find a house that's close to where you're going to be working. You just don't want to be out on the highways every day. It's going to drive you nuts. Number 5.
Number 5, the homeless situation. Apparently, the homeless situation's getting kind of bad in Atlanta. I mean, it's bad in most major cities, but Atlanta's been picking up steam over the last few years.
Well, homelessness actually is less of a problem now than it was 10 years ago. I recently had some clients in town from Portland. They were telling me how the homeless have basically overrun their neighborhood parks. Their kids can't even play in the park because there's homeless people everywhere, and there's needles and poop and all kinds of stuff like that. And they were saying, wow, it's really refreshing to come to Atlanta and there's just no homeless people. Outside of deep downtown Atlanta, you almost never see homeless people. You'll see some panhandlers, on some exit off ramps, usually inside the perimeter. It's actually pretty rare to see anybody panhandling outside the perimeter. And you definitely don't see these big tent cities that you see on the West Coast, where you just basically have these huge, more or less permanent homeless encampments. You just don't see that anywhere in Atlanta. There was one homeless encampment right where I-85 and Georgia 400 come together. It was there, 5 or 6 months, kind of up on this knob, and the city of Atlanta came and just cleared it out and bulldozed the whole thing. Gone. And there was actually a new study just released that showed that Atlanta had the lowest rate of homelessness among any large metropolitan area in the entire United States. So take that, Briggs. Number 4.
Number 4, below average test scores. Atlanta is really not knocking it out of the park when it comes to their 12th grade and below. And Area Vibe gives Atlanta, Georgia schools an F.
Well, this is a tale of two cities. If you're talking about the city of Atlanta public schools, yes, those are mostly terrible. They have reading and math proficiency scores that are absolutely in the basement, and graduation rates that are just an embarrassment. Still, there are some City of Atlanta public schools like Morningside, Mary Lynn, and Springdale Park, where the PTA has maintained control over the school instead of the school board, and they still produce terrific results. Now, Metro Atlanta schools are very different. For example, the city of Decatur has one of the most highly rated school systems in the state. And while DeKalb County schools can be a little hit and miss, Cobb and Gwinnett County both run very good, very highly rated, and very in demand public school systems. And there are hundreds of private schools all over Atlanta to fill every education niche. Most people who move to Atlanta decide on a school or school system first and then pick their neighborhood so they can be close by. Number 3.
Number 3, the crime rate. Now, this is a perfect example of when the reality of a situation doesn't match what people's opinions are. The crime rate in Atlanta is actually 24% lower than the national average. Their violent crime rate is also 24% lower than the national average.
Well, violent crime is mostly a City of Atlanta problem. If you look at a crime map, you're going to find that most of the violent crime in Atlanta Metro is actually located in the City of Atlanta. Property crime does happen in the suburbs, and I think that's mostly because people in the suburbs have a lot of material wealth. There's a lot of nice cars to steal and, occasionally houses to break into. But Georgia is not a soft on crime state. If you get caught stealing people's property here, you're gonna go to jail. We're a law and order state, and that's one of the reasons so many people are choosing to move here. You see places like New York City and Los Angeles and other places on the West Coast that have completely abandoned public order. We're not like that, and that's why so many people want to move here. Number 2.
Number 2, the air quality. Atlanta has some bad air. Anyone in Atlanta will probably agree with that the air kind of sucks in Atlanta. It's not the worst in the nation, but it's not great.
The air here in Atlanta is actually quite good because we have so many trees. The air actually always seems very fresh to me. What we do have in Atlanta is an intermittent air quality problem, which mostly occurs during the heat of the summer.
The primary reason for the low air quality is Atlanta has a soot particle problem. Yeah, they got a lot of coal power plants, wood stoves, diesel emissions, other things like constant traffic, construction, and
the fact is Georgia has exactly one remaining coal-fired plant in the entire state. It's actually located just about 60 miles northwest of Atlanta, so it actually has very little effect on the city given the prevailing winds. Most of the power plants in Georgia now are powered by natural gas. The biggest problem we have comes from traffic and auto emissions. When the sunlight hits those auto emissions, it forms ozone, which is also known as smog. And you get days where, especially downtown, the sky isn't blue. It's actually very gray and hazy. Some of that is because of the humidity. A lot of that is because of the smog. Now, looking at this chart, you can see that the poor air quality tends to peak in the summer, but we do get these little blips of bad air in the spring and fall, and we do have plenty of days in the summer where the air quality is perfectly fine. Number 1.
And number 1, the high cost of living. Atlanta's got a pretty high cost of living. It's really not that bad, but compared to, let's say, 5 years ago, they've gone at a faster pace than a lot of other cities their size. When you count how high the rent is and home prices are in Atlanta these days, it's growing at a pretty fast clip.
Briggs has this correct. The cost of living in Atlanta has gone up, not just inside the perimeter, but all over Metro Atlanta. Part of this is the general increase in inflation that we've seen since COVID and since the government started dumping trillions of dollars of free money into the economy, driving up prices everywhere. Part of it is related to the super low interest rates that were prevailing up until literally just about a year ago that was driving the cost of housing through the roof. But a good chunk of the increase is really due to increased demand. I think people's perception of Atlanta and the quality of life that you can get here has dramatically changed in the wake of COVID. So many people were living in these big cities and suddenly decided, hey, it's not healthy to be jammed in with all these people on the subway or on the streets on a daily basis. And people also, the one thing you ask people, what do you want? What are you looking for in a house? They say space. They just want space. And what they mean is not just that the house itself is humongous, but that they have a yard, their kids can play. They can get a little breathing room, still talk to your neighbors, still be friendly, but just have a little space where you can breathe and exist on your own, not be jammed up against people all the time. So many people are wanting to move to Atlanta, and our housing supply is still fairly tight here. That's done a lot to drive up prices as well. Now, looking at the cost of living, if the average cost of living in the United States is $100, and this includes food, shelter, transportation, and healthcare, the state of Georgia actually ranks a 91 and has a below average cost of living. The cost of living in Metro Atlanta is actually about 14% higher than the state average. So if Georgia, the state, is a 91, then Atlanta is about 105. Now, this is still well below the state averages for California, Washington, Oregon, New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, and Illinois. So Georgia, I think, is still a really good bet, and it's still a really good value if you're factoring in the cost of living. So I hope this helps to give some objective balance to this very popular video that Briggs made, which, while it gets some things correct, kind of sounds a little bit more like I Googled Atlanta and these are the things that I read versus, my opinion and my reality living in Atlanta, as I said, for almost 35 years now. I really know Atlanta in depth, and I'm always going to give you the straight scoop. So as always, if you're thinking about moving to Atlanta, feel free to reach out to me. My contact information is in the box below. I'd love to talk to you, help you plan your move or your investment in Atlanta.